to Season 4, Episode 7 of Upbeat from Everything Conducting. My name is John Devlin, and I am the music director of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra.
And I'm Enrico Lopez-Yanez, Principal Pops Conductor of the Nashville Symphony, back for more action. We had a kind of different take on our podcast last time with our collaborative episode, and now we're back to a little more traditional time, so we get to hang out and chat it up again, John.
Then we're going to visit a more traditional format for our interview, which is going to be with Diane Wittry, who is the music director of the Allentown Symphony and somebody with whom I've worked for many, many years, first as a member of one of her workshops, which I went over and did in Kiev maybe 10 years ago. And then I apprenticed with her at the Allentown Symphony. And then more recently, she and I have joined each other on the Conductor's constituency leadership team for the league. And so I spent the time at conference with her in LA at the beginning of June. And Enrico, as you know, she's one of the foremost thinkers about what conductors do off the podium, which is certainly a big topic that we love to talk about here.
Absolutely. I enjoyed speaking with her when she joined our other podcast, the Everything Conducting Roundtable podcast, as a guest there. But I'm really looking forward to getting some sort of one-on-one time with just Diane to hear about all of her great ways of thinking. She's such an accomplished conductor, author too. I mean, if you haven't read her books, that's another great source into the mind of this fabulous conductor. So we are very excited for this. Why don't we give our first upbeat and head to the 4-4.
Welcome back to the Upbeat podcast. We're so excited now to be joined by our guest for today's episode, Diane Wittry, a dear friend of mine and a former teacher. And Diane is named nationally as one of the top 30 professional musicians by Musical America Worldwide for her work leading orchestras, and is a highly respected conductor in the United States today. She is currently the music director and conductor of the Allentown Symphony and the Garden State Philharmonic. She is also recognized as a composer and a respected conducting teacher. Her books Beyond the Baton and Baton Basics, Communicating Music Through Gestures have become standards in the conducting field. Diane, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let's pivot a little bit and talk about Allentown. What a profound thing it is that you have been the music director there since 1995. As somebody who is looking up at you and what you've achieved there in a community that's not so dissimilar, right? We're in the same part of the world and same type of people and place we're trying to impact. I'm in awe of what you've been able to do there. And I did some research into your the start of your tenure and found that you were there. There were just 5 subscription concerts and 2 days of school concerts when you started, an ununionized orchestra, and no shell in your hall. Are these all true facts?
These are all true facts.
Yeah.
And the hall was in quite disrepair.
And now look at what you have achieved there. It is thought of as like the model of what a great regional orchestra can be like and achieve artistically. So first of all, congratulations. And second of all, having just been in my job for a few years, you're changing board presidents and executive directors, and different people are the head of the players committee, and you have seen all of that and stayed as the constant. So what would you give as keys to your success? What are the ways you've navigated the progress you've wanted to make for the orchestra, found those improvements, and connected deeply to the community such that you were the right leader for 3 decades?
Yeah, and some people choose to stay and build, and other people choose to build for a while and then jump. So there are different types of careers, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm a builder, and I love to see and experience the impact that the music can have on the greater community, and that gives me great joy. So with Allentown, as you mentioned, we all go through multiple executive directors and administrations and board presidents, and so flexibility of work style is very, very important. You have to really morph a little bit to adjust to the different work styles of the people you're working with. So that's very, very important. For me, I knew exactly how I was going to build, and I wanted to make sure that every single year we were adding something new and challenging the board and the community and exciting the board and the community about what we were doing. And so even though we evaluate some of the things we started early on, we are not doing anymore. They were great projects, but they kind of had their life cycle. But some of the things that we were able to do is keeping artistic quality always at the forefront was one of my goals, which I believe helps with fundraising. Obviously, you can't grow an orchestra without having the dollars to back up the growth. So that's very, very important. And it's all based upon personal relationships. So being a music director that builds those relationships over time is very, very important. But as the orchestra got better and better and was, of course, unionized and more musicians winning the auditions were not from the region, I formed the Allentown Symphony Chorus because I wanted us to maintain a connection, a very deep connection to our community. We also have recently formed our musician chair sponsorship program, and I'm very proud to say that all of our musician chairs are sponsored, all of them. And that is also about building relationships between our donors in the community and our musicians. And so we have a dinner every year that they get together. Our musicians send emails to their donors. They communicate. It's all about building relationships. We started about 11 years ago our El Sistema Lehigh Valley program, which serves underprivileged students. We have about 110 students in the program, and that was a big leap of faith. We went into that without having the funding in place, but we felt it was important, and our donors have really stepped up. We started doing chamber music, featuring our own musicians, because I wanted them to have a place that they had some artistic say and that they could really be the stars individually. We added pops concerts because I know that not everybody in our community is interested in classical music, and therefore I believe the orchestra must serve all of the constituencies in the community, and pops concerts was a very logical next step. We started to build our community engagement programs by our Young Musicians String Festival, which is for very young musicians, and they actually learn arrangements of some of the pieces we're playing on concerts, and then they come to these concerts with their parents, so their parents can see, particularly for a young string player, that there's a chance that there's a future in this, that they're going to actually at some point sound really good, because beginning string players, it's hard. It's really hard. We started doing family concerts, and my latest one that I'm very pleased that we're finishing our third year of a composer in residence, which is very, very exciting. But not to just have a composer in residence, I built a composer consortium of 8 local composers from universities and high schools throughout the region. And so they are our avenues to all of the composers in the area. And they also help teach, and we do a summer workshop, we do a call for scores, and we do chamber music concerts, but featuring submissions from people in our community, which I think is really, really exciting, that we're nurturing that creative spirit. And then we also started the Conducting Fellows program, which we're in our, I think, 11th year, and over 60 conductors have gone through that program, which is very, very exciting. And we do 2 competitions, a big national competition with a $12,000 prize, and then also local competitions with smaller prizes, but wanting to encourage on both levels. And so building not only for our own community, but also building to put the orchestra on the map nationally was one of my goals, which increases the fundraising because the donors see that the orchestra is getting recognition on a high level.
I'm just floored at how much you guys do. I just don't know what to, it's incredible.
It keeps us very, very busy.
And what's so incredible is that is all done, like you mentioned earlier, with the size staff that you have compared to somewhere, say like Nashville, where, maybe we have a larger staff, but I'm so floored by the amount you are accomplishing with that staff size and that budget, and it's just so commendable. That's incredible.
Well, thank you. And in addition to that, we own a concert hall. So on a very small budget, we also produce a whole series of jazz cabarets. We do the Met Opera HD, and in my tenure there, we have completely renovated and expanded the concert hall. So we've renovated all of the building, and then we built an additional building. So I give credit to, I have a phenomenal board. I have a lot of past presidents that have all stayed on the board. We have some various generous people, and it's really been a wonderful experience here with the Allentown Symphony Orchestra.
So none of us have any excuses anymore now. I mean, you have proven that any orchestra can do anything they set their minds to, and more than that. That's incredible.
I've always heard, it's never a problem of money. It's always a problem of vision. And so, particularly if you're out there listening, get that vision going in your mind, that idea of what could be, and talk about it with people and find out what resonates and what people get excited about. We're working now on developing a diversity fellow program, and I'm hoping that will be rolled out next year. But it's continually finding out how you can do more good in your community and share the music with more people.
Well, I hope that a lot of our listeners are inspired and will try to take on that work themselves. As you know, a lot of our listeners are young conductors just getting their start and have many years of growth ahead of themselves to reach the ability to impact in the ways that you are able to in Allentown. But do you have maybe one recommendation for our young listeners out there, maybe the single most important piece of advice you would give to a young conductor? That's a lot of pressure on this question, but Phil, if you have any thoughts on that.
How about, I'll give two things. So one is really you have to develop the discipline to study every day and to continually be challenging yourself to be learning and growing. And that's tough because you get your degree, you study, you're working really hard, and then you get out in the real world. And suddenly you're having to make a living. You might be doing a job outside of music, doing something else. How do you have the discipline to continue working on becoming the best conductor you can be? So first off, discipline. And second off, perseverance. Because I always say it's often the game of the last man standing. Who is still there? So many people give up. And so you have to not be discouraged. There's a lot of rejection, right, in this field as a conductor. A lot of rejection, and you have to just let it roll off you and realize you are where you are. And if every day you're getting better, and every day you're working on learning and growing, you're going to make it as a conductor. And also remember that we need conductors, excellent conductors, for all of the ensembles in the world, not just the United States, all of the ensembles. And that means high schools, colleges, church groups, community orchestras, youth orchestras, ballet orchestras, opera orchestras, regional orchestras, professional orchestras. They all need phenomenal conductors and artistic leaders. And so your job is to bloom where you're planted and to make that the absolute best experience you can for all the people listening to your music.
Well, Diane, I think you can tell Enrico and I are incredibly inspired, and we cannot wait for a couple weeks from now when so too will our audience, because this was a beautiful half hour to spend with you, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And now, the code.
Well, this was a special guest-filled episode, John, and I am so thankful for it because both Jason and Diane just had so many key words of wisdom, I think, for our audience. And I mean, I learned so much. I'm sure that you did too, as did our listeners.
Yeah. In one of my questions, I compared, what Diane has as a structure to what I have here at Wheeling, because Wheeling is not a place like any I've ever worked in. it doesn't have a thriving artistic scene that international people are coming in and contributing and hundreds of people making a living doing art. It's a different format, and Allentown is a much bigger city than Wheeling, but it's in the same region of the country. The same type of people come to our concerts. And so that's why I look up to Diane as one of the very, very biggest mentors in my life and someone I aspire to be like. It's impossible to hear her talk about the myriad programs that she has started in Allentown and not think that every one of those is for the good of the community, derived from community need. And we use that word community as a buzzword all the time. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I just get the sense from someone like you that works at the biggest orchestras in the best cities and sees a lot, that you were also impressed with Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I mean, we talked a little bit about this off the mic, but, as young conductors, sometimes our goals or our drive is, one day I'm going to conduct the Berlin Philharmonic or XYZ orchestra. And that might be great. And that might be a nice, feather in your cap. But the kind of work and impact that someone like Diane is having in her community, the legacy of growing an organization. And, she's talking about 110 kids in a young string program. Year after year after year, you are literally changing the fabric of that community and impacting so many lives that, what more could one hope or wish for out of a career than to have something like that and be able to grow and see something flourish through music, through the music making that we've done and trained ourselves to be able to do. That to me is incredible.
And it was very heartening to hear her say things like, a lot of people blame a lack of resources. She didn't quite say it this way, but really sometimes it's a lack of vision. Mm-hmm. If you are a music director that's like, I want to conduct Brahms symphonies and the Berlioz overture beforehand and a concerto with someone famous, it's like, okay, but if you're a listener to our podcast regularly, you know that Enrico and I both believe in figuring out what your goal as an artist is that differentiates you from others. And I think you could hear that Diane, with 27 years of experience in Allentown, has created dozens of things that are unique to her, and some things that feel like new ideas to the younger generation. Right. It's like, oh no, Diane Wittry did those 15 years ago. And it's important to hear that and hear the things that, she's told me about mistakes that she's made and how to avoid them. And then she's told me about how to be successful. And I have a bookshelf in my office with a lot of books on it, and some of which I've never read, as I'm sure we're all guilty of. But one book that has been read many times is Beyond the Baton. There is invaluable information there about how to do so many different things, how to navigate with a board, how to write a good cover letter, how to program a good audition concert, what to interview questions. Everything. Just, if you haven't done it yet and you listen to this podcast, go buy that book and spend a weekend and ingest it, because it's too important not to.
And just to touch on something else you said, if your drive and your desire is to conduct a Brahms symphony with a Berlioz overture at the beginning of the concert, that's great too, and that can have an impact. But the key is that you have to find ways to connect that and make it impactful, because simply the act of presenting it and putting it out there because those are the pieces you want to do, that's just displaying art. That doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have an impact with it. And there are so many ways, whether it's through pre-concert lectures, going out into the community, finding community connections, or educating the board, or young musicians, like Diane was saying, if they're learning a basic version of a Brahms melody and then connecting that. There are ways to have that same repertoire that you want to be doing maybe, but having a much stronger impact in your orchestra organization and community if you get creative with it, if you try and find the ways to make that impactful. And it can be just as impactful as having a living composer on your concert if you're creative about it, if you come up with a way to make that connect to the audience. And I think that's important to keep in mind.
This has been a rather rambunctious episode of the Upbeat podcast. Make sure, as always, to check out the website, everythingconducting.com. There is new material headed up there every single month. And also, don't forget to check out our Round Table podcast feed. That's also available on all podcast platforms. And we look forward to sharing with you our October episode. You'll hear that on our next Upbeat.